Shalom, shalom, shalom. It's your brother Aklamak doing an exhaustive, unflinching, multi-strike against one of the most confused doctrines in Yasha Allah today. Listen, Yasha Allah, there is a difference between scripture and foolishness. The word of Yahweh is perfect, clean, and clear. But man's doctrine, full of contradictions, that would have gotten you killed under the very law that they believe they are trying to keep. So let's go to the foundation of this particular doctrine of the Lunar Sabbath. Because again, if you pressure test it through the lens of Torah, only then will you know if it has holes in it or not. So instead of going to the books of the prophets and trying to decipher what they are saying or outside sources, you have to go to the word of the Father. So when you go to Exodus 16 and Exodus 20 or Exodus 31, these are the very first direct revelations of the Sabbath as it pertains to the children of Israel. There's no other way around this. And none of them mention a feast, a moon, a cycle reset, or floating or transitional days. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 16, verse 23 through 30. And it reads, "And he said unto them, This is that which the Lord hath said. Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye shall bake today. Seethe that you will seethe. And that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. And they laid it up till the morning as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. And Moses says, Eat that today, for today is the Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field. 6 days ye shall gather it, but on the seventh, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. And it came to pass that there went out some people on the seventh day for to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? See, for that the Lord hath given you the Sabbath, therefore he giveth you on the 6th day the bread for 2 days. Abide ye every man in his place, let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. And so the people rested on the 7th day. Now, in any of those verses, from the foundation of when they were in the wilderness of sin, and the Lord is testing them, teaching them, restoring one of the most sacred commandments known to the creation of mankind, the Sabbath. Nowhere in there do you hear the word feast. Nowhere. So the children of Israel are told to gather manna for 6 days, rest on the Sabbath. No mention of a moon, no feast commandment. The 7th day was the test of obedience, not a celebration. Does the scripture say 6 days ye shall gather manna, but the 7th day thou shalt have a feast? Where is that at? What's the book, chapter, and verse? Because Exodus comes before Leviticus. Leviticus pertains to a priesthood that's not in existence yet. Exodus is the foundation when they enter into the wilderness of sin, which was a month away from going into Sinai. So the emphasis was rest, not ritual, not festival oriented. If this was about a feast, why wasn't it called one here? How come no mention of a feast as they practiced the Sabbath through the month that it took them to go into Sinai? They went into the wilderness of sin on the 15th. They entered into Sinai on the 15th of the next month. That's 4 straight weeks of keeping the Sabbath. Not a single command about a moon, not a command about them acknowledging the sign that's in the sky. Moses commanded nothing regarding anything pertaining to a lunar tenet. You have to deal with that. Okay? You can't just run from this and go to what you think is the foundational chapter, because it's not. If they're doing the Sabbath before you even get to this priestly ordinance. So even when they got to Sinai, did they even hear it when they heard the 10 commandments verbally? The answer is no. All right. Moving forward. So after weeks of activity, Moses going up and down the mountain, Moses giving the 10 commandments verbally, the people going off, Moses comes back with the 2 tablets, the 10 commandments. And this is where the Sabbath is written into law. Still no priesthood, still no tabernacle, but the Sabbath is now a law. I need you to deal with that fact, something that the Lunar Sabbath proponents absolutely refuse to acknowledge. I don't know what the infatuation with Leviticus 23 is. When it comes to the Sabbath, it's like nothing, no other books exist before Leviticus 23 when we're talking about the Sabbath. That chapter, that book is the foundation. They may say Numbers 10. Well, Numbers 10 is written after Leviticus 23. Numbers 10, they're getting ready to leave Sinai. So Leviticus 23 is the foundation for this doctrine, but it's not the foundation for the Sabbath. You got to deal with that. This is the book of Exodus, chapter 31, verses 14 and 15, and it reads, "Ye shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy unto you. Everyone that defileth it shall surely be put to death. For whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days may work be done, but in the 7th is the Sabbath of rest, holy unto the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death." I didn't hear anything regarding a moon. I didn't hear anything regarding a feast. These are the early tenets of keeping the holy Sabbath. This book, chapter, and verses signify when it's literally etched into stone. So the notion that someone has to look in the sky is beyond far-fetched, because from Exodus 16 to Exodus 31, not a single command came from the Most High to Moses to the children of Israel as it pertains to looking in the sky. For weeks, for months on end, they have been keeping a weekly Sabbath without even paying any attention to the sky. An uninterrupted pattern of 6 days of labor and 1 day of rest. You have to deal with this. You can't just run the Leviticus 23. You have to deal with this. Now, the Sabbath is now a life and death situation right here in Exodus 31. It's life and death. The Sabbath is now law. So the doctrine that you have has to be airtight, complete, and unambiguous, because in Exodus 31, there is a death penalty attached to this law. And you're telling me it's incomplete? You're telling me that there are more tenets that need to be added when you can die for doing this wrong now. That is the absolute lunacy of the doctrine of the Lunar Sabbath. It is absolutely just unbelievably dumb. And I don't mean that to disrespect the brothers, because they're doing the best they can, being teachers and trying to keep the commandments in a way that is pleasing to the Father. But the doctrine is Swiss cheese. You have to deal with that. So the Sabbath now in Exodus 31 has a death penalty. That means clear instructions. You don't have any margin for guessing. No mystical calculations, no floating days. You don't read that. Moses says nothing. What Torah are you reading, or are you adding to Torah just to have your doctrine stand? That's on you. All I can do is warn you as a brother. The ones that really don't care about you are the ones who won't say anything. But at least I'm saying something. This ain't Yahtzee. You don't have several times to get this right when it's etched in the law. They have been practicing this thing for weeks on end. There are no more mistakes at this point. So at Exodus 31, the Sabbath has become Torah law, etched in stone with a death penalty attached. Now here's where the problem comes in at. This is the book of Exodus chapter 40 verse 17 and 18, and it reads, "And it came to pass in the first month in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was reared up. And Moses reared up the tabernacle and fastened his sockets and set up the boards thereof and put the bars thereof and reared up his pillars." So this is the second year. They're in Sinai in year 2. They have been keeping the Sabbath for almost a whole year, uninterrupted, week after week. Not a single command about looking in the sky to know the times. Not a single word about floating days, transitional days, days that count, days that don't count. You don't see any of that. In any of this, do you ever even see the word feast or hear them make a mention of it? You have to deal with this. Because, like I said before, it's law now. You mean to tell me that you can tell them, oh, it's a feast later when there's a death penalty attached? Don't you know how idiotic that doctrine is? So I'm going to keep hammering the point until you at least go back and look at what you're teaching people. So the Most High apparently just commands Moses to build a tabernacle on the first day of the month, which happens to be the new moon date if you follow the Lunar Doctrine. According to their doctrine, the new moon date is a Sabbath, but the Lord, who just made the Sabbath a law with a death penalty, is now commanding them to break his law. Make that make sense. Now, mind you, when he was teaching them this ordinance, the Sabbath, when he was teaching them this in Exodus 16, he was getting mad with the children of Israel because they weren't doing it right. And now they got up to the point where they're doing it right, and he etched it in stone and made it law and a capital punishment if you don't get it right. The first thing he does is tell them to break it. So when you bring up this point to the people who believe in the Lunar Sabbath doctrine and teach it, their answer is similar to those who try to push Trinity. Oh, that was just in his humanity. That's all I hear when I hear them say, well, the Lord commanded it. No, you don't get to escape out of that. I'm more convinced that the new moon is not a Sabbath, and that's why he commanded the work. But you will double down on your doctrine and make it seem like our Father is unstable. And that is the absolute craziness, the lunacy of teaching this doctrine. So they're working on the Sabbath. Is that work or is that worship? So under the lunar logic, you can establish a law in Exodus 31 with a death penalty. In Exodus 40, you can violate it only to get more instructions for the Sabbath later in Leviticus 23. Only the proponents of a lunar Sabbath believe that. That's why I said Leviticus 23 is not foundational when it comes to the Sabbath. if the Sabbath predates it. Leviticus 23 highlights the appointed times, which are the feast. Clearly, the feast are separate from the weekly Sabbath if they've been keeping it for a year prior to anything remotely being told about keeping a feast day. The feast, sure, when you read Leviticus 23, the feasts are likened as Sabbaths. That's why the instructions for the Sabbath is written in verse 3. It wasn't introducing it. You guys try to hold guys to the tenets of Leviticus 23 as if that's the first mention of the Sabbath at Sinai, and will not come off of it. It's Leviticus 23 or nothing. And I just find that insane. So the Most High teaches the Sabbath in the wilderness of sin, gets mad because they weren't getting it right at first, reiterated the Sabbath at Sinai, etched it in stone in Exodus 31, but now we're getting put to death for breaking the law that wasn't even finished yet. That's your doctrine. You're going to stand on that. Is this sound doctrine to you? Because it's not to me. You're telling me the Most High is setting up the children of Israel to die before the law was even done being written? As new amendments were continually being added after it was already etched in stone? This is what you're saying. And a death penalty attached. Please abort now. That's the nonsense you guys are teaching. So according to this doctrine, the Sabbath is always on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd day of each month. And they're basing that on, guess what? Leviticus 23. They say the Sabbath always falls on this date, and when you ask for proof, it's Leviticus 23, but they will go to the wilderness of sin where they begin on the 22nd. But here's the problem with that logic. They've been keeping it for a year without hearing anything about a feast, a transitional day, a floating week, looking up at the moon. And the Most High said the sign is the 6-in-1 pattern. Under the lunar model, that 6, you have to deal with the fact that the 6-in-1 pattern immediately breaks if you have floating weeks or 8-day weeks. That is what's so insane about the doctrine. At what point do you just get to disobey the 6-in-1 pattern, which is the foundation of the weekly Sabbath? How do you bring that upon yourself to say, oh, I don't have to keep the Sabbath this 7th day, it's a floater? That is nonsense, man. And it's not even in the Torah. It's made up. Moses commanded nothing regarding that. So let's break this nonsense up a little bit more. The new moon starts the month and resets the week. The new moon is supposedly a Sabbath, but I just showed work on the Sabbath. And not only that, if the new moon is a Sabbath, you're saying that there is a Sabbath day on the first day of every month. Please show the Torah precedence of that. That is another area you're adding on to Torah, the Lord's words, the foundation by which the entire Bible flows from. And you don't see the error in that? Then there are transitional days and floating days that exist outside of the weekly cycle. So what is a week? What really is a week? How do you have a 7-day week when you have 8 or 9 day gaps every month? That's the lunacy of this doctrine. And if the Sabbath resets every month, then the first 6 days before the 8th, the Sabbath must be working days. That means on the first day of the month is what? A work day? A non-work day? Does it even count? Is it even the beginning of the week? No one knows, because you get to add or subtract to this doctrine as you see fit. Under this model, the first day of the month can't be the first day of the week, because if the first day of the month is the first day of the week, that would make the 7th a Sabbath, and that would make the new moon not a Sabbath. So under this model, the first day of the week has to be the second every month. Or do you just bypass the first 9 days or the first 8 days and the first day of the week is the ninth? No one knows. That's what makes this model insane. If work isn't forbidden on the new moon, do you get a death penalty for breaking the new moon? I mean, the Sabbath? Is there a death penalty attached if you don't rest on the new moon? Can you show that in Torah? Again, there's so many holes in this doctrine. That's why I decided to do it this way instead of doing it the classy way I did aforetime. I'm going to show you just how insane this doctrine is. So we don't even know if the new moon is sacred under this doctrine. Is it a floating day, a work day, a Sabbath, a feast? What do you do? What do you do in this model? Apparently you don't die if you don't keep a Sabbath, but it's a Sabbath. Oh no, it's a feast. It's insane. I thought no servile work could be done. So, when did Sabbaths take place on the first of every month? We do not know. There's no biblical precedence. There is no command from Moses. Moving on. So let's move out of Sinai, right? Let's go out of Sinai, and now the children of Israel are headed towards the land of Canaan. This is the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verse 32 through 36, and it reads, "And while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man that gathered sticks upon the Sabbath day. And they found him gathering sticks, brought him unto Moses and Aaron and unto all the congregation. And they put him in a ward because it was not declared what should be done to him. And the Lord said unto Moses, the man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones without the camp. And all the congregation brought him without the camp and stoned him with stones, and he died as the Lord commanded Moses." So let's unpack this. Again, the Lord teaches the children of Israel the Sabbath in the wilderness of sin based on a 6-in-1 pattern, no moon commands, no transitional days, no lunar nonsense. They get told about the Sabbath again a month later after keeping the Sabbath on that 6-in-1 pattern only, according to the manna test. They get the stones where the tablets where it's etched in stone and it becomes law with a death penalty. And apparently the Most High all of a sudden commands them to actually work on the Sabbath. Then he's adding more tenets to the Sabbath when you read Leviticus 23 according to their model. And now as they go toward the land of Canaan, a man is gathering sticks and he's getting put to death. That is the... Can anyone else notice the inconsistency with what's going on here? Either there is no consistency in Torah or the lunar Sabbath model is bull. It's made up. The Lord didn't command anything that has to do with it, and Moses never taught it. That's why you can't show it in Torah. I just gotta believe your doctrine. And I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do that for anybody. You shouldn't be willing to do that. All doctrines should be pressure tested. So, should he have, the guy that got put to death, yeah, he was probably a heathen or something like that. But what should he have done in that instance? Should he be resting or should he be feasting? According to the lunar doctrine, a Sabbath is a rest day and a feast day, apparently. So he don't know what he's supposed to be doing. Should he have waited for a transitional day? Or was that a new moon? Should he have been, feasting instead of freezing? Because he's trying to get sticks for a fire, I'm sure. Or should he have just consulted with the moon? It's insane. Do you see the problem now? The man died for violating a law you say doesn't even follow a predictable cycle. That's the problem. You have just made the judgment of the Most High look unstable, and he is not unstable. Your doctrine is. So Exodus 16 proves the cycle was unbroken. Leviticus 23 adds feast days, but the weekly Sabbath was already law. That's why it's listed. The Most High is commanding them to observe the Sabbath no matter what. That's why it doesn't say in verse 3, and the Sabbath is a feast. But if you read in real context, verse 4 picks up where verse 2 left off at. You just trying to include the Sabbath as a feast when it's a day of rest. Nowhere are you commanded to feast on the Sabbath outside of a feast day. But the Sabbath is weekly. They've been keeping it for a year. And Numbers 10 shows no lunar resets. So the book of Joshua tracks days of war, and it still honors a 7-day rhythm. Ezra doesn't talk about floating Sabbaths. He's doing work on the first day of the week. When you read Ezra 7 and 9, the Most High says nothing about it. So is it a Sabbath day or not? Nehemiah locks down the Sabbath gates every 7th day, not on the 15th or the 22nd. You're skipping all of that to serve the purpose of the moon. So you can't be following Torah with this doctrine. You're following men you esteem. That's all good, fine, and dandy. But at the end of the day, if your doctrine modifies Torah, adds words to God's mouth, adds words to Moses' mouth, then your doctrine cannot stand. No matter how much you want to go hard for it or not. You can't keep trying to press guys out based on the tenets of the sanctuary that did not exist while they were keeping the Sabbath. That's lunacy. The sanctuary did not exist. How can you make guys give you a breakdown of dates pertaining to a sanctuary that wasn't in existence and make that the tenets of a Sabbath they were keeping when there was no sanctuary? How do you do that? Y'all supposed to have picked up on this by now. Where does it say any of these things about a floating day in the stone tablets? Where does Moses ever teach it? Why didn't Yahushua follow it? Why doesn't Paul mention it? Because it ain't there. So, but we know what is there on the Exodus 31. There was death for breaking the Sabbath. Numbers 15, death occurred for breaking the Sabbath. A Sabbath that we can see in the scriptures and him breaking, not Sabbaths that I'm applying to days that are not Sabbaths. So that's not a floating cycle. This is a 6-in-1, a 7-day reoccurrence. That's the Sabbath. The way the Most High planned it out for himself and for the children of Israel. So the doctrine is guilty of being confusing to the people, adding to the word, making the Most High seem unjust, silencing Moses, replacing instruction with astrology, basically. Is guilty of spiritual oppression in the name of freedom. Is guilty of setting the sheep up for a slaughter, basically. Let the Most High be true, man. Let the Most High be true. So, the Most High rebukes the Israelites in Exodus 16 for disobeying the Sabbath command. He tests them with manna. He emphasizes rest and says clearly, "See, for that the Lord has given you the Sabbath, therefore he giveth you on the 6th day bread of 2 days. Abide ye every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day." So he's training them, teaching them discipline, showing them the rhythm of obedience. By Exodus 31st, it's no longer just instruction, it's law with a death penalty attached. So it gets really, really bad when you begin to unpack this, man. So once again, when you present the information with the clear, unbroken weekly Sabbath cycle shown in Exodus 16, even before the law is etched in stone, you show them doing it on the way to Sinai. You show them doing it prior to even rearing up the tabernacle. How are they responding to this? But what about the 15th of the month? Let's turn to Leviticus 23. What about the festival cycle? You're not honoring the proper moon date. Really? Like I said before, for anybody listening, this is madness. This is confusion. There was no sanctuary for them to hold you to that chapter. There was no sanctuary. There was no priesthood. There was no altar. There was no temple. There were no feast days. Only manna and obedience. How do you press people with dates pertaining to a sanctuary that does not exist yet? So they reject the proven Sabbath cycle revealed through miracles, signs, and judgment, just to hold brothers accountable to feast regulations tied to a sanctuary. You're arguing over priestly ordinances while ignoring the literal voice of the Most High that thundered from Sinai. That's just insane. Spiritual insanity. When did it become cool to ignore the voice of the highest? So you're pushing lunar dates like temple priests when there wasn't even a tent built yet. The lunacy needs to be called out for what it is, a doctrine of ego, because it's not of the Most High and it wasn't given of Moses. And let's get to the floating day. Let's ask the obvious question that, I guess the elders won't touch. They'll probably just cuss you out because you dare question their model. If floating days exist or transitional days and they're not a part of the weekly cycle, then what are the laws pertaining to those days if they're not real days? Can you murder somebody on a floating day? Can you sleep with your brother's wife on a floating day? It doesn't count. Can you skip offerings and sacrifices because the count resets? Can you eat pork steaks at a barbecue? Because technically the day is not part of the week. That is literally the lunacy of what we're talking about here. Days that don't count. Days that don't count when Yahweh demands blood every morning and afternoon. Did he just say, well, on the transitional days, I don't need my sacrifices? Don't you see that this is not in Torah, and it presents a very big problem for those who are actually trying to do what's correct? You're adding. You're not supposed to add nor take away. That's exactly what this doctrine does. This is the book of Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 1 and 2, and it reads, "Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments, which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that ye may do them in the land whither you go to possess it, that thou mightest fear the Lord thy God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I command thee, thou and thy sons sons, all the days of thy life, and that thy days may be prolonged." Apparently, except the floating days. Apparently, except the transitional days. Apparently, there's some loophole somewhere in here where the law disappears for 1 or 2 days every month. That's not Hebrew order, bro. That's Babylon witchcraft. Because according to your doctrine, on the 7th day, thou shalt rest, means unless the moon says otherwise. So what happens when the moon goes dark? Does righteousness go dark with it? A floating day becomes a day with no law, no commandment, no order? That's not of the Most High. That's chaos. And you want to teach this to a nation under judgment. So the weekly Sabbath was revealed before the sanctuary, my people, before moon cycles and before any festival calendar. Exodus 16 establishes a 7-day unbroken cycle that requires no lunar observation, no sanctuary dates, no transitional loopholes. By Exodus 31, it carried a death penalty. Leviticus 23 added feast days beside the Sabbath, not in place of it, and nor did it modify it. The sanctuary manages the feast ordinances, but the weekly Sabbath remains the signature of Yahweh's perfect creative order. The Lunar Sabbath Doctrine collapses under its own contradictions, introducing floating days, sanctuary-dependent timelines that didn't even exist when the Sabbath was revealed and restored, and confusion that would make the Most High unjust for judging people for unclear laws. Bottom line, the weekly Sabbath is creation-based. The Lunar Sabbath Doctrine is man-made. Who do you serve, the Most High or man? Because you have no answers for any of this that I'm bringing out, and I'm only bringing it out so you would at least go back and study it, and you will see the madness that you're not pressing people with this. You're oppressing people with this, because this doctrine cannot stand. Now, when you go and you look at all these precepts and see the madness that's being presented, I hope you brothers, all of you out there who teach this, would repent and go back and find those people who you told about this doctrine and tell them the real way to keep the Sabbath based on the 6-in-1 pattern that the Most High set. And with that, that's all I got for you. Shalom.